Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. The COVID-19 pandemic has caused a shift in online activity. Joining me to discuss how these trends have accelerated as a result of COVID-19 and if they are here to stay for the long term is Steve Wagner, Global Managing Director with Decision Analytics at Experian. Steve, it's great to have you with us. Welcome to Trade Talks.
Thank you. Great for you to have me back, Jill, and I appreciate it.
You recently conducted a survey that found that there has been a significant shift in online activity and transactions. Do you think this is a trend specific to the pandemic, or do you think it's something that's here to stay?
Well, that's interesting. It is certainly a trend that we've seen fairly pronounced. So, in fact, when we've done this survey, and as you remember, this survey I love because it's got consumers on the one hand, about 4,000 that we're interviewing, and about 900 businesses. They're all coming back with the same answer, which is that consumer online transactions are up about 20%, which is quite a bit. The interesting thing about that, there's some highlights. So online loan processing up about 40%, grocery shopping up about 40%. I think those points are interesting because it shows that people are willing to do that online shopping in environments they expect to have a high degree of trust, right? So, so in particular, what we see is that businesses are looking to ensure that they respond properly and that they can create a trusting environment for consumers.
Your survey also found that only 32% of businesses have made adjustments to meet these new consumer demands. Why do you think that number is so low?
Yeah, well, that's the opportunity for our businesses. So I think what most businesses really did was they scaled up the way they were doing business online to the extent that they could. And everyone experienced some of the same things. They experienced higher levels of fraud. They experienced challenges with consumer satisfaction and consumer happiness because they were in a more contested environment than they expected. So you say only 32% have changed their practices. Now that's true, but actually 32% of businesses have really turned around and started gearing up to figure out how to do more business online and create better, happier, customer experiences.
So how can businesses make a difference if this trend continues?
Yeah, so about 60% of all the businesses that we surveyed were continuing their investments in really understanding more about who their consumer is, making sure that they understand how to access the consumer, how to understand exactly who they're dealing with, to get that kind of segmentation so that they can figure out how to treat the consumer as well as they can. So for example, in a fraud context, some fraud solutions really increase friction. The more I put barriers in the way of you doing business with me, the less happy you are as a consumer. But increasingly, there are fraud services out there that are more passive in nature. And that's one of the things that the businesses that we investigated are absolutely doing. They're looking for those passive approaches where the consumer isn't quite as aware of the fraud check that's going on, and they're only aware when they need to be aware. In other words, you think this may not be the transaction that you expected, and therefore you raise the friction in the transaction to make sure you're dealing with the person that they say they are.
Yeah, it sounds like 2020 was the year of pivoting, and 2021 and beyond is really going to be about creating a seamless experience for the consumer. So to wrap up here, were there any additional findings from the survey to share?
Well, just one thing to play on what you said, which is that a substantial number of consumers actually said that they were more trusting right now of online transactions than they were of in-person transactions in certain contexts. So, and the number was above 40%. And we thought that was phenomenal in the sense that I think all of us have experience with the idea that some of consumers have reached that tipping point. They will be online now. And so we absolutely need to make sure that we're serving all of them and creating great customer experiences.
All right, Steve, appreciate the insight as always. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks.
Thanks so much, Jill.
And thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.